Okay. Uh, so let's start with the app, like what we are going to do. So here we have started our server and it is running on 3000 port. You can see it like it's a very similar like React app that you see all the time using Create React app. And it just, they have built like a basic functionality of how do you make it work, like count and counter and stuff. So what we are going to do, we are going to start with using hooks. Okay. So here, like if you look at your SRC, you have all these basic files. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to create and delete most of the files that we have in SRC. So I'm going to go into SRC and delete everything from here. Uh, and I'll start from scratch. Okay. So here, like we have a SRC file. And one of the things that a lot of people are facing problem with is like actually using something like uh, React 18. So if you look at the version of React that we are using, it is version 18. And there are a lot of new things into React 18, but we don't have to do a lot of things. You just have to start with just using the how do you start using React 18 in terms of like just rendering your element to the DOM, right? So here you just have to import the React DOM as you do, and you import it not from React DOM, but instead of that, because right now you're using client, so you use it on client. You will also learn like better, like in future, like how to use it in server or something, but right now you don't need to do that. At the same time, I just need to import React from React. And after doing that, you need to create root. And how do you do that? So I'll just go create a variable called root, and that is going to be something like React DOM dot create root. So it has a function called create root, and that accepts the element where you want to deploy your thing. So if you look at your index.html, you'll see that it has a div with ID of root. So I can just go ahead and just say something like document dot get element by ID, and here I can pass root. And so this is how you create root. And after doing that, you have to like render it. So you render not on the React DOM, now you render on the root element that you create. What do you want to render it? It depends totally on you. I can just go ahead and create a H1 element here. I can just say hello, save it. And if you go and look at it here, you can see that it will have hello. It should have hello. Just give, let me see what's going on here. Mm. Yeah, so here I'll just change the file name. So src index.js is what we are looking at. You don't need to do it in like create React app, it will work properly. I'm just going to say pm run dev and it should be working now. Fail to pass. Okay. Yeah, so we have hello now. So this is how you use React 18 and you have the basic stuff going on. But like, yeah, future we are not going to do it like this. We will have something like app.jsx. We'll just build it like this. And we will have a component like you import React here. So we have React and we just need to do a basic function. So we can just export it from here. And instead of just rendering this, we can just import app, and the same story goes like this. One extra thing that you can also use is like you can use like strict mode if you want, like that you can also see it in React docs. If you go into their docs, you will be able to see like, and for better understanding, I would suggest you to just start using the docs for the, they have created a new docs that is at beta.reactjs.org, I think. Yeah, just let's beta.reactjs.org. Yeah, this one I think is the latest docs that they are working on. And I think you can just start looking at this for your reference because it will give you better reference in terms of how you have to make it work. So like installation and everything start with your UI thinking in React, all of it is here. So when you're going to use something like strict mode or something like that, you start using it there, no problem with that. Like you can start using it strict mode and everything here. Now I'll start with hooks. Okay, so like what I'm going to do is like I'm just going to start with a basic hook that is obviously use state. So like, do you guys want me to start with class component, or you just like I should start with functional? And we're just leaving. The reason I don't want to start with class component is because I don't want you to do the comparison all the time. Just think in terms of how functional works and how classes work. Try to keep it separate. Means that's my suggestion to all of you. Is like that is how you should be thinking about this thing. Is like keep those two things very separate, like in terms of your head, like so you'll have less problems like thinking about it. So I'm just going to start with just a functional component, okay? And here we just need one hook. Like, so for example, here we need access to something like use state. And I think anybody who had tried like hooks, it will be very easy for you to think about what use state does. So use state is just like a hook that can accept one value. You can pass them an initial value, and in return it gives you access to two things, okay? And that we can just call it whatever is like, we can call it count. And just to look at it what it does, I can just go be like console.log count just to see what it is. I just want to see what it does and what it is. And what I can do is like I can just log into it and see what it is returning. So if you look at it, it is returning an object, and that object is an array that has a value of count. So it is returning something like an array, and the first value is a first initial value and second is a function. So that this is what it does. And generally we don't write it like this, but you can actually write it like this. You can just be like const value is equal to count of 0. and and similarly you can have a second one that will be like update value or something like this. So update value is going to be a function. And if you look at the console log, you can see the first value is a value that is 0 and the second is a function. So here I can be like, okay, value is coming from, this is count. Count of 0 is going to be the value. Update value is a function that is coming from count of first value. And you can use it anywhere here in the component. If you just want to say it like count can be used it like count here. So sorry, not count, use it like a value here. And similarly, what if you have a button? You can just have a button here. Like I can just put it here. At the same time, let's just have a button. And that button will have something like update increment. Let's call it increment. And whenever you call increment, I need to just do something like on click. And on click, it will just call this function. And this function is just going to update by calling the function update value. So you have update value, and update value will just accept a next value what you want to update it with. So I can just go ahead and say value plus 1. And if you just go look at it, you can just be like, it's working in the same way as it was. So that's how it works. So use state is a hook that can help you retain a value even between re-renders, okay? So that is what is happening here. So you have count that it returns, and you don't want to do it like all these 3 lines of code. That is when you use array destructuring. So array destructuring is writing something like this. If you have an array, you can be like array of 1 comma 2 comma 3. What if I want access to all these 3 values and store it into 3 different variables? So generally you do it like this. So you will be like const 1 is coming from array of 0. Similarly, you'll have something like 2 that will be coming from array of 1, and it will be 3 that will be coming from array of 2. So this is how we get 3 values. And if you want to go and console log it, you will be able to access it like say 1 comma 2 comma 3. And this will work like, but like this is how you do it in general. But what you can do, the same thing can be done by using something known as array destructuring, similar to object destructuring it is. So it's like you do array destructuring, and this is how you can do it. You can just be like, I want to create 3 variables, and I want you to destructure it from this array. So you create the variable using an array, and you just say something like 1 2, and 3. So all it is doing it is creating a new variable. It's accessing the first. Why? Because it's at index 0, index 1, index 2. So it will go inside the array, look at the index of 0 and store it into value called 1. It will go into an array, look at the index 1 and store it into variable called 2. So these two are exact same thing. Writing it like this or writing it like this, it's the exact same thing. How do I know that? So you can test it by just using something known as Babel. Everybody knows what is Babel till now, right? Like Babel is used for transpiling your latest code to some, like how it used to work in previous version or something like that. So if you want to look at like how it works here, you can just go and look at it here. Like say I can take this code from here, and at the same time I can copy this here and see what's going on here. You'll see exact same thing is happening here. It's just saying creating a new array. So this let got converted into var because some of the browsers still doesn't support let. So they can do it like this. So it's like array. You created a variable called one that is accessing the zeroth property. Two is, so it's just basic JavaScript known as array destructuring. You can look into that later. But this is all it is doing. So we can use array destructuring to do the same thing. Here we can just create an array. We can just be like count, and you can just call it set count, update count, whatever you call it. Like it doesn't matter. It's totally upon your preference. And instead of set count, I can just say sorry, set count. You can use it like this. So this is your basic uh, like use of hooks is here. You can go ahead, refresh your app, and you'll see the same thing that you were doing earlier. You click on increment. Sorry, it should be count. Refresh it, increment it. Everything is working properly. So everybody is okay with this much. What is going on here? If you have any question, please bring it on. Any question, anyone? Yeah, so like now, like moving on to next thing is like say what we can do is look at why do we need to put it into something known as hook is a very important question that everybody should understand is like why it is like why do you need to use a hook? Why not just store a variable something like this? Why can't we do something like count is equal to 0 and have a function that is set count, and all it does is like that is going to be a function that is going to update count should be equal to count plus 1. What is the difference between these two things? Like say like what is the difference between this and this? Anybody who can explain me the difference between this? Anyone who can understand like what is going on? Like why do we need a hook rather than why not we store a variable, or why can't we do this? There are two different things happening here. Like this is 1 and this is 2. So why a hook is important instead of having a variable? What is the difference between a hook and normal variable like this? Anybody who can walk me through this? Awesome, awesome. That's a really good. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And just give me a second. I'll just like uh, enable prettier. Yes. So what Rahul said is exactly what it means. Let's just try to understand the difference between what it means to use hooks and how it is different from just a normal variable like count and set count. How is it different from it? So I'm going to comment it out. Let's just try to understand what's going on and what does it mean every time we say something like re-render, or what does it mean? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say something like here. I just want to say console.log uh, something like inside. app. And I'll just go ahead, refresh this, and you can see that as soon as you log this, you see something like inside app. And every time I'm going to increment it, let's see what is happening. Everybody can see what's happening here. Like this inside app is being called every time we are updating this value. What it means is app is a normal function. That function is called only because it is called. You can see that this console log is being rendered there, right? Only if app is called. So you can just be like, okay, just go ahead and call app like this. And every time app is called, this is known as re-rendering. So every time like you update the state, this app will re-render, and re-rendering just means calling this function again. That's all it means. Now, like, think about if you have a variable like this, what will happen to the value of these two things? So I'm just going to comment it out and put it up there on the top so we can compare the differences between these two inside app. And here I'm just going to say something like count and set count. Like, let's see what happens here. So as soon as I refresh it, you can see that inside app, like so or you can just, let's call it like app is called. So we know that app function is called or app component is called because a component is just a function that returns something like JSX or React element. But here, look at it. Like the first thing that happens is app is called. Why app is called is because if you look at inside your root.render, you're calling app. So app is being called. As soon as it is called, you're seeing a log message app is called. Along with you have a value of count is 0 and set count is a function. Now, like what happens when we click on increment? Look at it. When we click on increment, what is happening is like it's throwing some kind of like error. The error is saying something like assignment to a constant variable. So instead of that, let us fix it by saying let. So this can update the value of it. So I can refresh it, click on increment. Look at it, nothing is happening. It means that the app is not being called again. Even if it would be called again, think about what will happen. As soon as the app will be called, it will create a new execution context. In that context, count will always fall back to 0 every time. So it's like, so normal variable or normal function will not be able to retain the value of previous state or something, because that is what we need, right? Like we need to retain the value of what happened earlier. And that is one of the reason, that is a main reason we need to use, rather than using a normal variable, we use something as hooks, because it will be able to retain the value. Same thing I'm going to do, but this time I'm just going to comment out the variable and just use a specific hook coming from React called use state. The same story, app is being called and the value of count is 0 and set count is a function. As soon as you click on increment, what happened? The value retained the value from previous, that is 0. And as soon as you click on increment, it went up to 1. Why? Because you added 0 plus 1 became 1. You click on increment again and you see the value it is, even though the app function is called again and again and again, your value is retained there. The same thing doesn't happen into a normal function. If you want to see that, you can just call something like count, and count is just, we can just have a count function, and the count functions can have something like let count is equal to 0, and here we can just be like return count plus 1. And every time you call the function count, what will be the output you will get? Will it retain the previous value, yes or no? Hello, anybody is listening? Okay, yeah. So like normal function doesn't retain the value of previous value, and that is the difference between having a component and having a normal function. So if you see here, this is a component, and that is because we are using use state, it is able to retain the value of previous state, and that is why use state is very important. Like, and it is the only way to go. Like, say, store the previous value or something like that. So this is your use state. It's your first hook that you can use, and hook is just storing the previous value. It's able to retain it. And like, so when you start using hooks, you think of like whenever you need to have hooks, it will always be a one value or zero or something. You can have any value here. You can have it as an object. You can have it as a null, whatever you want to do it. It's totally your choice. The only thing you need to understand is like the difference between a component and a function. So that is what is happening here. So I'll move on to the next hook, that is use effect hook. So use effect hook is mostly for maintaining the side effect of your hook, like your component. A side effect of a component means something that you want to do whenever your values are changing or something like that. So like let us try to keep example of it. Like, so what if I want my title of the website to change every time the count updates? So now the count is 2. I want this to update here. Instead of y tab, it should be having something like count is equal to 2 or something. So I don't know if you know that, like how do you update the title of any document? You can just say something like document the title is equal to a value that you want to do. So you can just be like count is equal to, and you can use curly brackets of count. So if you go to your app, you can see the count is 2 right now. Look at it. It's just happening right now. It's like you are re-rendering and this thing is being rerun again and again. You can keep it into your like body of the function and it will work. There's no problem with this. You can just go ahead and say, every time this component is being re-rendered, I want to update my count. So, and your count will update. And so every time your state will update, obviously it will re-render and this will work. So this is also a kind of side effect. You can just increment it and you can see the count is being called again and again and again. The problem happens is like whenever you have like, what if you have more than one state? Like you have another state of like something like username. So if you can see, you have username and you can just call it set username. And username starts from empty. I can have like input something like this here. Uh, Instead of h1, I can just going to call it like input here. So let's just create an input element, input of type text, and here I just want to store whatever is the username. So I can be like username, and on input I can just add a event listener of on change. I want you to update the username. So we can be like set username, and we'll call it with whatever value you want. So you have event object and you can call it with event dot target dot value. And so here, like if you look at the app now, like you can just go and type something and it will be updated here. So if you think about it, what's going on right now, you look at the console. What if I just put a console here, console.log, you can see app is called. So I can just like go ahead and start clicking on increment. Look at it. App is called once. Click on increment. It is called again. Why? Because the state updated. Which state updated? The count updated. What if I go ahead and type here and say Sam? And you can see every time I'm typing here also, it is being updated. And that means that like this function is being called again and again and again. Can you see that? So this is being called because this function, the whole function is called again. But I don't want document the title to change when username is changing. I just want it to change when count is changing. So this is unnecessary rendering that is happening. Is like, why do I need to call it even if username is changing? Because app will be called no matter what. You increment the value of count, it will be called. You type something here, it will be called. So in both the case it is happening, but I only want this to happen whenever the count is updating. So this will not work for this case because we are just skipping it into a function, and every time this function will re-render, this will happen. So we don't want this because it is unnecessary computation that is happening. And that is the reason we need use effect hook. Like use effect controls that behavior. It will only run it on certain use cases whenever you need it. So I can just like run the whole thing, whatever I'm doing here, I can just put it into a hook called use effect, and let's see what is happening here. And I'll also put a console log here just to see when this function is being called. Okay, so I just can call it use effect is called. just to see which function is called right now. So you can see that app is called, it happened first, and then use effect is called, it happened second. I go ahead, click on increment. You can see again, app is called, use effect is called. So use effect accepts two parameter. The first parameter is a callback function. The second parameter is a dependency array. And that is what we are going to use. If you don't pass any dependency array, then it will be called on every re-render. Every time your app is called, this will be called again and again. As you can see it here, look at it. I am typing here. You can see use effect is called all the time. You type here, use effect is called all the time. But I want to control use effect. I want to control that you should only be called at certain level or certain timing. And that is when we need to pass the second parameter. And that is known as dependency array. So dependency array is like it's saying use effect. Oh, when do you need to be called? Like this function will be called when. Dependency array controls that behavior. Like when do you want this callback function to be called? Because by default, if you don't pass this, like anything, a dependency array, this will be called on every time. So this is as good as not having it. Even the same thing will happen. So if you have a use effect that doesn't have a dependency array, it's better to just not have a use effect at all because it's doing the same story altogether. Look at it. So I have use effect. How many times it is being called? Look at it. So if I refresh it, you can see that it is called here. It is called again here. You click on increment, it is called again. Even if you don't have use effect, it will do the same story altogether even now. Like I refresh it, it is being called two times. I click on increment, it is being called two times again. You type here, it is being called two times again. So when you have a use effect and it doesn't have any dependency array, it means that every time your component will be re-rendered, and when your component will be re-rendered, every time your state changes. So every time your state changes, use effect will be re-rendered again and again and again. Re-rendered means recalled, this function. But I want it to control because when do you want to update the title? You only want it when your count is changing. So that is when I just want to go and say, hey, I don't want this use effect to depend on anything. It means that it will be called only once. Let's see. Refresh it. Use effect is called. Click on increment. App is called, but use effect is not called. Because of that, you can see the count remain to 0, even the count is here. It's not synced properly. And that is when I'm like, okay, I don't think that this is going to be empty. I think it is going to be count because we are using the value of count inside this callback function. So we can just go ahead and say count. What it means is re-rendering of this function or recalling of this callback function depends on this value. So every time count changes, app will be re-rendered and this callback function will be recalled. So now if you go ahead, refresh this page, count starts from 0, your count is 0 here. You click on increment here, you can see there these two values are synced. And here if you look at it, initially the app was called, use effect is called, app is called again because we click on increment, use effect is called again. But look at this one. When I go ahead and type something like ARYA, even though app is called, use effect is not called, right? That is what is dependency array means. Dependency array is like the calling of this function depends on this array. So in future, what if I just want to make it depend on something else also? So you can be like, okay, what if username is also being displayed in the title? So I can be like, okay, username is being displayed on the title. It means that every time username updates, you need to recall it. So you can pass username here and it will work exactly how you feel it should. Like, so look at it. Count is 0, username is empty. I click on increment 1. Use effect is called, and because of that, you can see the title here. You can just see ARYA, and you can see that value is being updated here also. So dependency array controls how many times this callback function is going to be called. And that is what use effect does. Use effect just controls the behavior whenever you want it to be called and based on using the dependency array. Any question, anybody here? Everybody understood what's going on with use effect? Okay, perfect. All good. So this is what use effect does. And like say same goes to like, so what if I want this value to like say instead of updating the title to count one, what if I want it to update it to something like title? Like say every time this is happening, I want to update a timer or something like that. So here, like instead of having count, what if I want to display a timing or something? So I want to display as soon as you open this website, I want to have a counter that stores like from how long you have opened this website. So it is 1 second, 10 second, 20 second, whatever it is. What if we want to do something like that? So we can just have something like a timer or something, right? Like, so whenever we want to do something like that, we need to have something like set interval, right? All of you understand what is like, you understand set interval, right? So we can use set interval to count like how many seconds are you on this website for. So I can just be like set interval, and set interval accepts two parameter. If you can see it from here is like a callback function, and the second is a timing. So I'm putting a callback function that callback function is going to update the title or the second if you want to like if you want to store a timing also you can do that. Like I can create a store, I can call it time and set time and starts from zero. And what I want is like every time that is happening, I want you to update the timing to something like set time to be whatever is the time to next time. So I can be like time plus one. And I want it to be called after every 1,000 milliseconds. So we store the second there. And every time that is happening, I want you to update the title of it. Say, what if I want that? So I can just update the title, total time is going to be whatever is the time value. And I can just say, oh, my dependency array now depends on time. So now you can just refresh this page and you can see the timings is starting from zero. And you can just, if you just wanted to make it something like this, you can say 0 second. Total time is 7 second, 8 second, 9 second. But look at what is happening. Like say right now, it is having like it's going really well. Like say it's a 0, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 1 second at a time. But the problem happens is like, what if I also want this to depend on something else, or like what, like every time this count starts, I want to call this function. So what it does is like this set interval will be called multiple times. And because of that, maybe what can happen is like say multiple set interval will be there, the instance of multiple set interval. So use effect has a last thing that we need to understand is like from use effect you can return something, and that something will be called whenever your component is unmounted. So you understand like every component has like life cycle of certain things like this. Like say every component goes through this life cycle. So as soon as your component is mounted, so you remember like when you were learning about component did mount or component did update, you understood the difference between what does it mean when you say mounted. So mounted means your component is rendered on the page and it does the basic stuff, your state updation and everything. And at the end, it can just go and say unmounted. So unmounted is a place when like your component is done with and it is not displaying it anymore. That is what it means with unmounted. So unmounted, if you guys everybody understands unmounting and mounting, right? Anybody who doesn't understand it, if you don't, like I can explain you that. Everybody understands what is mounted, like mounting means like mounting of a component and unmounting of a component. All good? Yeah, just to rephrase, if you want understanding of that, I can just mean like say, what if I want to display I have one component right now. What if I want to have another component that is second JSX, and here I can just have a function like function second component. So here I can be like, you have whatever you want to return, I can be like h1 second. So and you can export it. So this is your second component. So generally unmounting means like right now, what if I just want to go ahead and display app component? And if you go into app, what if I just say whenever my state is, say if count is equal to 0, I want to return or make it like this. Whenever count is equal to 2, I want to return a second component. So I can be like, go ahead and return a component called second whenever count is 2. So right now, if you go and look at your app, refresh it, and if you want to look at it properly, you can see it is app, right? We can see it is app. But increment, look at it. Now you have second, you don't have the previous one. So generally what happened is like you mounted this second component whenever the count is 2. And as soon as it is not 2, look at, we cannot increment it from here, but what if we go ahead and increment it from here, say 3, it went back. So that component got unmounted. If you want to see like how it is working, you can just make it work there, but that is all mounting and unmounting does. So I'll just remove it. Just for your understanding it was. And so use effect is called as soon as your component is mounted for the first time. And whenever your component is unmounted, whatever you return from this callback function. So use effect accepts one callback function. That callback function can also return something. And that will be only called whenever your this component, wherever your use effect is unmounted. And if you want to see how it is working, you can see it in terms of like say I'll just go ahead and let just give me a second. I'll just try to implement an example that can show you the use case that we are talking about. I'm just going to remove this time also for now, uh, because we generally use that to clear timing or something. That's why I was trying to give that example. So I can just bring it back to easier example that we were having, like remove this. So we have this example. All I want to display now is like when you click on it, it's growing with the value. Now what I want is like I want you to like see how is this component like going through multiple phases. So I'm just going to use effect here. We'll import it from React. And here, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say console log mount uh, mount second. And from here, I'm also going to return another function. You can see here, I'm returning this. So I'm just saying return, and I want you to console log unmounted. And it doesn't depend on anything, just like let it like it only runs once, that's all. And what I want to do is I want to display this component for a second and just hide it again. So if you can look at into your app, I don't want to return it from here. I want to have my this thing. All I want to do is I want to display just below this component, say whenever count is equal to just that like 2, you have to display this component that is second. So what it means is all I'm doing is I'm displaying the second component whenever the count is 2. Whenever it is less than 2 or more than 2, you don't have to display it. So the second component will go through the mounting and unmounting of it. So that we can see it here, refresh it, go into console. No console log right now. Means second component is not there. To be specific, look at it. Do we have second component? No, we don't. Second component will only be visible when your count value is 2. So let's go ahead and click on increment 1, increment 2. As soon as second component happened, what do you see? Mount of second. That whatever happened is like if you look at the second component, this got called whenever this component got mounted. It means that use effect gets called whenever your component mounts. Okay, and that is what happened here. Now let's go ahead and click on increment again. Now the value is going to be 3. What happened? Your component was mounted earlier, but now it was removed from the UI. If you can see that there is no component like second component. But if you go ahead and refresh it again, I'll just walk you through again. Count is 0, increment, increment. You have second component here. But what if your value changes from there? Now the second component is removed, and that is when unmounted is being called. Now it will not called again, it will only called whenever your component is mounted and it gets unmounted. So whatever being returned from use effect, callback function it will be called whenever your component gets unmounted. So generally, when do we use it? So we use it at times like set interval or add event listener and remove event listener. So whenever you're removing an event listener on the page, say for example, something like what if whenever I'm showing a practical use case, what if I want like as soon as this component is mounted, I want you to add an event listener on document, and whenever click happens, I want you to call this function, and that function is just going to alert something. So I'm just going to be like alert and call you clicked on the page. Okay, so I'm just saying like, okay, I want as soon as this component gets mounted, I want to add an event listener on document and say that if anybody clicks anywhere, I want you to alert a message saying you clicked on the page. All good? Now I'll go ahead and save it and see what is going on here. I refresh this page. Look at it. Second component will only get mounted when your value is 2, so nothing will work. But look at, as soon as your value is 2, you clicked on the page. Now click on anywhere. Look at it. Click on anywhere, it is working. What if I just click on increment again? Now the value has changed to 3. The second component is removed. But look at that, event listener is still there. Even though second component is not here, the event like it's still having the whole story all together. Look at it. I cannot remove that event listener even though my second component was unmounted. How many of you are following me right now? You are able to understand the example here? Okay, I'll just, anybody who is not able to follow any question you have, I'm happy to answer it. Okay, I'll give you an example again. So generally, if you look at the code, what we are doing is, we are doing whenever the value of count is 2, I want you to mount the second component. Whenever second component is being mounted, the first thing that happens is, I event listener on the document is being added. Whenever you click on it, I alert a message saying you clicked on the page. So I go ahead, right now you click on anywhere, nothing is happening. There is no event listener. Why? Because second is not mounted yet. I made the value to be 2. As soon as that happened, look at it. Anywhere you click, that alert message is there. You click no matter where. You click on here, it will be happening. You click on here, nowhere, it will be happening. You click on increment also, this will happen, but now the value got changed to 3, but event listener is still there. And this is the problem that we are going to solve now by removing it here. What if I want to remove it as soon as this component is removed? I don't want you to be there. I want you to, like, I don't want this to be there anymore. So that is why whatever you return from this callback function, I'm going to be like, okay, document dot remove event listener of click. And whenever that happens, I want to remove this. I want to do that. So now let's see what happens. Increment, increment. Okay, look at it. Anywhere I'm clicking on, it's alerting the message. But as soon as I click on this, look at it. So it's still doing it because we have not used the event listener in the right way. So generally, like what it wants us to do is to have reference to the same method. So I can create a method here. I can just say function click, and click does what? It does this, like whenever you want to click, it will do this alert thing. So it's just a click, and I, rather than repeating it again and again, I'm just going to say whenever click happens, I want you to call the function click. Now, as soon as you are unmounting, I want you to remove the click event listener on document with this function click. So now we are referencing to the same function, so I think it will be working. Let's see, increment, increment, we are saying it, click on outside everywhere. You can see that thing, but as soon as you click on it again, look at it, the event listener is gone. Means it was removed using this thing. So that is the everything you need to understand about use effect. So just to recap, use effect accepts one callback function and another dependency array. Dependency array says that when do I need to recall this function? So every time your value changes here, it will recall it, as we saw it in example of app where whenever count changes, I wanted you to do this. But here we were not returning anything. That is the last thing, like what you return from a callback function. It's like whenever you're adding an event listener or you're doing set interval or something, a timeout or something, you need to clear it in your unmounting of this component, and that is what is used here. So three things: it accepts two parameter. One is callback function, another is dependency array. From that callback function, you can return something that will only happen when your component gets unmounted. And this is everything about use effect. And don't think of it in terms of class component, like, okay, this is component mount, this is this and this. I would think of it as synchronization. Like every time this value changes, I want to synchronize the effect that you want to run, that is updating the document title with the new value. So every time your state updates, I want to synchronize it. Every time your date updates, I want to synchronize it, and that is what you can do it here. So this is use effect, means understanding of use effect. This is how it works. Like, so everybody understood use state and use effect properly? Any question? Okay, nobody is having question. Uh, yes, yes. Yes, yes, it will be only used. Like, say, that is what I was trying to say. Is like, say, in this case, I'm not using unmounting at all because title, I don't want to care about it anymore because it's not something that uh, persists on the page. Add event listener persists on the page. I showed you that, right? Like, even though our component was unmounted, that event listener was still there. The same is the thing with set timeout or like set interval. Every time you pass an interval, it will keep happening and it will go into a loop of everything, and that will go wrong. So whenever you're using something like subscription, I don't know, means in future you'll learn about like a live subscription of like Socket.io or something like that. So either in the case of Socket.io or event listener on time or interval, you need to do this. You need to clear it out. That's very important. And even though, say for example, what if somebody says that every time your component, like this component of app unmounts, I want you to clear the document to something like nothing, or say hello or something like that. So whatever you want to do, whenever your component unmounts, you put it into a callback function. From here you put it as a return, and you put it here. Means whatever you want to do, it can be custom use case, but in most of the time we use it whenever we are using something like set interval or something like event listeners. All good? Any other question? Perfect. Yeah, go ahead. Hmm. Yes. No, you cannot use it outside. Like wherever you define it, you can only use it there, or else you can pass it as a prop to other things. So I'll give you a very good example for your question. Like I didn't understood your full question, but I'm just getting where like what I understood from your question is like, say, think about it like this. You have to like, you have an array. Okay, so you have an array of numbers like 1 2 3 4 5, something like this, and you want to add these numbers like using for loop. So you just go something like, I want to use a for off loop or for off or for in loop, whatever. I'm using for off loop here, and I'm just saying, okay, I want to get a const, or usually the normal for loop doesn't matter. You can just be like, let I is equal to 0, I is less than array dot length, and I plus plus, right? I want to sum all these numbers. What happens when I just go ahead and say something like, let sum is equal to 0, and every time you run this loop, I want you to do something like sum is equal to sum plus array of I. Means, do you think this will be giving us the right sum of this array? Yes or no? Exactly, it has to be outside of the for loop because you want to persist the value or the previous value of sum, right? That is the most important. You need to persist the value. Don't you think the same thing is happening here? Even though these two are inside, it feels like it is able to persist the value as if it is outside. Yes, so that is exactly what is happening. Even though we feel like this is what is happening, this is not what is happening. Like, even though it feels like this is inside this function, actually, this is not inside this function. Because if it would be inside this function, even if it is inside the function, this is what must be happening. Think about what use effect can do. Uh, so, what use effect can do, I can create a function called use effect. I can create a function use state, and whatever value you're giving me, I am updating or storing it into a value like this. I can just be like const mm, all state is equal to an array. And every time you want to call this use state, I'm taking this value and a way to update this value, and I'm store it inside this external variable, something like this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this value as whatever is the value. It can go into a bit more advanced level or something, but I'm just telling you the idea. Don't look at the syntax or think about the idea how this must have implemented, because somebody would have created use state. Either it is coming from here, or maybe I can have my own. What if I don't want to have this? I want to have my own. Can it work? Yes or no? That is the important thing. Can I make it work without use state in the same way that use state work? So it means that I'm creating my own use state. I have not done it earlier, so it can go into wrong direction right now, but let's just try to understand it. So I have a value. What I want to do, I want to persist it somewhere. I can create it here. So I can just be like, okay, how do I persist it? Let's just go ahead and say push. Push what? So I can just push this value into an array. Why I'm pushing into an array? Because this is how it works. So I'm pushing it into an array, the value, and a function to update the value. So the function can update what? It can update this specific value only. And how will you update this value? So I can push it here. Like, I can just have an array of arrays where I have the value. What is the first value? 0. And a function to update this 0, right? How can you update this 0? So I can be like all state index 0, whatever you want to give the value, the next value to be, that is how it is going to be. The next value is going to be 10, say, for example. So I want to say what? Like, I want all state of 0 to be equal to 10. Something like this. You able to understand what's going on here? This is all state. This is the first value. And I want to update it to this next value that you pass. Whatever you value pass, I want to update it to that value. Okay? So every time you call this use state, I want to do this. Like, let's just have a variable. I think what it is saying, it's saying expected comma. Uh, it's an it's an callback function. Okay. Uh, of 0 and 0, because it's two arrays now. I think it will work like this. Why it is saying comma? Oh, comma is missing over it. No, it's there. It's saying all state number. So something like this. So every time, like, your value, whatever value you pass, I want to push this value here, and I want to give you access to this function. So I want to do that, and every time I want that, I just want to return you that, and I'm storing it somewhere outside. And it has to be in a sequence, because like every time you call your false first use state, second use state, because I'm storing it inside an array of arrays like this, what I'm storing here, I'm storing the current value and the function to update this current value. I'm storing the current value and the function to update this current value. And every time you're updating it here by calling this function, the next value is updated here. So I'm storing it somewhere outside. Okay. This is how it works actually. And it, even though it looks like it is working inside this app function, this is happening outside of this, so it can retain the value. And that is what use state does actually. And but your question was like, can I access this whole array or something? React doesn't give us access to that, because if they will give you access to this, you can manipulate it or something, and they're using it for their own purpose, so they will not give you access to that array. So it's just only for React to use it. Make sense? But you understood how use state work, right? Use state is a function that actually manages the value inside an array of all the value that you have. Not only this hook, any hook that you're using all throughout your thing, it will be stored somewhere. Okay, perfect. Any question? Anybody? Any other question? All good? Perfect. So now we have understood about the basic hooks that we wanted, and we can go on to the next thing is like, let's just look at where we have. Yeah, here is our thing. So like, first question is like, we have learned about the basics of like basic hooks of use effect and use state. Now the question is, why hooks? So the most important and the basic thing that already I think Pawan already said is like, hooks allows us to make our functional component a stateful component, or anything that can have anything like use effect or something like that. But another important thing of why hooks is like, it will allow us to create a custom behavior outside of our own thing. Say for example, what if I want to fetch data and I want to have certain use cases for it, I can start creating custom hooks for it. Earlier, it was not possible. The only way it was possible is by using higher order component, and that was very complicated. I think it became very complicated at times. That's why this is very, very useful in that way. If you want to see like different hooks or custom hooks being used, you can, one of the easiest example you can look at is like something like, what if I want to have the behavior of toggle and I want to create a custom hook from here. So I can just do that. Like nobody can stop. It's just easy to do that. Like I can just go ahead, create a function, use toggle that accepts some, like a normal function. It accepts some parameter, and what it returns, it is returning a stateful value, like a value that can be retained here. And that is what is happening here. I can create a hook that is outside. Learn about custom hooks in a better way. Like just go ahead and just see the use cases from here. Use hooks. And custom hook is the most important thing about hooks in general. Say, I'll give you one of the use case of custom hooks, and maybe that will be easier for you to understand. Say, so what if I want to update the title of anything that I like, say for example, title on multiple pages. So I have use effect here, I have second page here. What if I want to update title in all of these different pages? So I can go ahead, create a thing like update title, or you always need to name your hooks multiple ways. So generally what happens is like, I want to update my title here, so I did use effect document the title is going to be this, and it depends on the count. What if I want to do the same thing here in the second component? I can go ahead, use second use effect. You can use multiple use effect at the same time. It's not necessary to use only one. Say one of your use effect depends on only be to be called once, so you use it like this. Another depends on like, that depends on some kind of external value, you can call it like this. What if I want to have a value here or something, whatever I have, I don't know, I don't have it anything right now, but I can have a state, and that state can, even here I want the same behavior. I want the title to be updated to something like this.